Joy Behar tried to trap John Kennedy with a leaked email, but he read it all live on air. It began with a whisper when an anonymous Twitter account with fewer than 200 followers posted a screenshot of an email supposedly written by John Kennedy, with the subject line reading, "We need to control how much truth gets out." Again, always vague, unverified, and out of character. But within an hour, Joy Behar was holding the printed email on The View, smirking as she waved it for the camera and said that if it was real, and she wasn't saying it was, it showed who he really was. The audience gasped, headlines exploded, and Kennedy's phone lit up with texts from reporters, staff, and allies demanding answers. His communications director, Emma, rushed in, saying they were getting crushed and that The View had run it like gospel, while John calmly watched Joy's grin frozen on the screen under the caption, "Kennedy controlling the truth." He picked up his own printed copy of the email, knowing something no one else did. It was real, but not in the way they thought. He ordered Emma to schedule a live appearance on The View, saying he was bringing the match. Back at the ABC studio, Joy confidently told producers he wouldn't show. But the next morning, a stage manager confirmed Kennedy was coming in person, live, leaving Joy visibly startled. The trap had been set, but they hadn't expected him to walk into it carrying the entire email and the real story. Kennedy arrived composed and early, wearing a sharp navy suit, carrying only a leather folder, drawing quiet disbelief from producers. Backstage, Joy laughed with a co-host until she was told Kennedy was in the green room and had brought a folder, causing her smirk to flicker. In the green room, John adjusted his suit as Emma texted to ask if he was sure, and he replied that they printed the headline, so he was bringing the full page. At exactly 11 a.m., the cameras rolled. Joy introduced him with practiced charm as the apparent author of a very interesting leaked email. Laughter followed, and John Kennedy walked on stage to polite applause without waving or smiling. Asterisk, he simply walked to his seat, placed the folder neatly on the table, and met Joy's eyes without blinking, thanking her for having him as she leaned forward theatrically and called him brave, saying most people wouldn't show their face after an email like that. John replied calmly that most people don't want the truth read out loud, prompting Joy to laugh and feign confusion, asking if it wasn't real. John opened the folder slowly and said it was very real, which was why he was there to read the entire thing, not the cropped version flashed for ratings, causing a shift in the audience as Joy straightened and reminded him they were live, to which he faintly smiled and said, "Exactly," pulling out the email as the trap began to spring in reverse. He placed the printed email on the table with deliberate care. The audience leaned in, and even Joy's smirk froze as he pointed out that she had read the subject line and opening paragraph, but stopped because the next 5 paragraphs didn't fit her narrative. When Joy said they showed what mattered, John corrected her, saying she showed what she wanted to matter, explaining the email was from a private strategy session about concerns over how information is shaped in public discussion, not about hiding anything, and that the line "we need to control how much truth gets out" was a quoted question, not a directive. He then read the sentence that followed, asking how people could get the truth unfiltered, quieting the studio as viewers realized they hadn't been told the whole story. John continued, reading about ensuring transparency, rejecting spin, and owing people facts even when uncomfortable, prompting silence and exchanged glances among the co-hosts. Joy tried to recover by suggesting his language should have been clearer, but John cut in, saying she should have read past the first sentence before discussing it on national television, drawing gasps and a single halted clap from the audience. Leaning forward, John said she hadn't exposed a scandal, but a strategy rooted in truth and transparency, framing it for entertainment instead of inviting explanation. As Joy looked unsettled toward her producers, holding up the final page, John said the email wasn't a confession, but a call for accountability that had been cut. edited and packaged like clickbait, and since they were live, he would give the audience what they hadn't, reading calmly as paper rustled. His quiet delivery louder than anything else in the room, leaving the view studio unprepared, not because he shouted or gestured, but because he simply read. Asterisk, line by line and paragraph by paragraph. He dismantled the accusation, not with emotion, but with evidence. As Joy Behar shifted in her seat and questioned whether the phrasing was questionable and why he would use a sentence that could be misunderstood, John turned to her calmly and said he assumed the people reading it would care about context, clearly admitting he was wrong, drawing nervous laughter from a few audience members as the moment stopped feeling like daytime TV and started feeling like a real conversation. John wasn't just defending himself, but highlighting the importance of full context when a co-host tried to soften the blow by suggesting the timing of the leak was suspicious and made him look like he was manipulating discussions, prompting John to finish her thought by calling it the game leak half a sentence. Imply intent, go viral, adding that the truth is never as exciting as the smear. The camera caught Joy's tight jaw as John reached back into his folder and revealed emails from the same thread. One where he suggested inviting more voices to the table, and another where he pushed for full release of information without edits, challenging them to talk about transparency. Joy accused him of planning it, and John replied plainly that she planned it and he just came with the whole story, earning applause from enough of the audience for the microphones to catch as some leaned forward with phones out. Backstage, a producer whispered they were losing the room. But John wasn't just winning. He was flipping the entire dynamic as the hosts grew reactive and defensive while he never raised his voice. By halfway through the segment, Joy Behar's confidence had cracked, her sarcasm and rhythm gone, leaving a studio unsure how to react as John stated that he was sitting on their stage reading his words aloud, saying they tried to make them scandalous while all he saw was transparency. Joy scoffed that the email still looked bad, and John nodded slowly, saying it only looked bad when cut in half, just like any conversation twisted by hearing one side, calling that a performance rather than fair discussion. The live audience shifted uncomfortably as some clapped and others waited for Joy, who instead took a slow sip from her mug while a younger co-host asked what he wanted the audience to take away. John replied gently but firmly that he wanted them to understand what actually happened, that he didn't need an apology, only for truth to stop being treated like a weapon, adding that while they called him dangerous for his views, he didn't bring politics that day, he brought receipts, and that seemed to scare them more than anything. Asterisk, that line hit her. And backstage producers were frantically checking comment feeds as viewers weren't tuning out, but tuning in, with one trending post reading that John wasn't backing down and was reading the whole email line by line with no drama, just fire, while another said Behar set the trap, but John brought the flashlight. Joy leaned forward again, slower this time, eyes narrowed and voice controlled, saying that if this was his strategy, it was working. But John didn't flinch and replied it wasn't a strategy, just the truth finally given a mic. In that moment, the studio went quiet, not because John had silenced them, but because they had finally started hearing him. And as the commercial break ended and the audience settled back into their seats, the energy in the studio shifted from confrontational to curious, with John still seated calmly at the table, his leather folder open like an invitation to truth. Joy, regaining composure, leaned forward with skepticism and intrigue and asked to dive deeper, questioning the parts about controlling the narrative and whether that sounded like gatekeeping. John didn't flinch, flipping back to the second page and guiding the audience through the projected text, explaining that context was crucial and reading verbatim that controlling the narrative meant countering misinformation, not suppressing facts, ensuring more truth got out, not less. He paused, letting the words hang as the audience murmured and nodded, Before a co-host interjected that in today's media landscape, controlling truth sounded like spin, and critics said the email proved he was part of the problem. John smiled faintly and turned the page, saying critics might say that if they only saw the snippet. Then read the follow-up about spin eroding trust and his advocacy for unedited releases, raw data dumps, open briefings, live streams, and a commitment to transparency over selective storytelling. The studio lights seemed to spotlight the folder as viewers at home tweeted in real time. Hashtags about the full email and context trending upward, while Joy pressed on with less theatrics, asking him to read more and what was in paragraph 3, and John obliged without hesitation. His voice clear and unhurried as he read aloud about inviting independent fact-checkers to review their releases. He read on about hosting open forums where questions could be asked freely, avoiding echo chambers by sharing counterarguments up front, stressing that it wasn't about winning but informing, then looked up and addressed the panel directly, saying, "This wasn't manipulation, but the opposite, about fostering honest dialogue in a world of sound bites." The younger co-host leaned in with genuine interest and asked about the suspicious timing of the leak before a major discussion cycle. And John nodded, flipping to another email and saying suspicious leaks happen, but facts matter. Then read a follow-up message warning that if the email got out of context, it would be twisted, which was why he suggested going public with the full plan and putting transparency first. Scattered applause broke out as phones buzzed and clips went viral, capturing John's unflappable demeanor while backstage producers monitored comments praising his lesson on context and accountability. Joy shifted tactics, softening her voice, and admitting he was making a strong case, but questioning why he risked misinterpretation, prompting John to set the paper down and say bold problems need bold language and misinterpretation only happens when you stop reading halfway, adding, "That risk is part of the job, but so is clarity, and that full disclosure with no hidden agendas was the goal." The co-hosts exchanged glances as his methodical reading peeled back assumptions. And a seasoned journalist acknowledged that hearing the whole email painted a different picture, but asked about practical implementation, giving John the opening to pull out a supplementary timeline proposing weekly fact sheets with sources, collaborative sessions with diverse viewpoints, public dashboards, unredacted reports, live Q&A with critics, and ongoing feedback for more openness. The audience leaned forward, captivated, as Joy interjected again in a more conversational tone, questioning whether it would hold up in practice. And John flipped to the final email, saying actions speak louder, and reading the closing line about scheduling the first open session the following week and inviting all stakeholders before closing the folder softly and meeting each host's gaze. Asterisk, this wasn't a secret plot, but a blueprint for better communication, and the shift in the studio was undeniable as the vibe transformed from a gotcha segment to an impromptu seminar on integrity. A co-host tried to balance the scales, pointing out that the original snippet looked damning and asking how John felt about it being cropped. To which he replied directly, yet graciously, that he was disappointed but not surprised, noting that culture clips often shortened full stories and that showing up with the whole thing mattered. Applause rippled through the studio, louder this time with some panel members nodding in agreement. While backstage, the director signaled to extend the segment as viewership spiked online, with viewers posting reactions, calling Kennedy reading the receipts live a game changer and noting Behar's priceless reaction. Joy, adapting to the flow, asked a softer question about the takeaway for the audience and how everyday people could apply it, prompting John to lean back, relaxed, and explain simply to always seek full context, not judge by headlines or snippets, and dig deeper to build trust in conversations, personal or public. The co-hosts, now fully engaged, followed up with questions on media ethics, and John fielded them with ease. quoting the thread that ethical reporting starts with completeness and encouraging it across the board. As the discussion evolved, it felt less like an interview and more like a collaborative dialogue, with John steering toward positive solutions rather than defensiveness. With one co-host admitting on air that hearing the full read made her rethink, and John humbly noting, "That's the power of the whole story." The segment stretched longer than planned, with audience questions via social media, including how to combat fake news, to which John responded, "Educate on sources, demand context, and share responsibly." By now, the trap had not only been reversed but dismantled, with John's calm, evidence-based approach winning over skeptics. And as the show headed to another break, Joy offered a rare concession, saying he'd given them a lot to think about, while crew whispers off-air praised his poise as unflappable. When cameras rolled again, the conversation continued seamlessly. John pulling out one last email and concluding that truth isn't controlled but shared, leading by example as the panel explored everything from social media pitfalls to everyday misunderstandings, emphasizing the importance of finishing the sentence before forming opinions, while viewers flooded comments calling it gold and Kennedy's wisdom bombs unstoppable. And when Joy probed one final time about whether some control was necessary in heated times, John countered gently, "Control through openness, not omission." Asterisk, as John wrote, "Full truth empowers everyone." Applause swelled as the segment neared its end, the hosts thanking him with genuine warmth while he stood, folder in hand, shaking hands all around and saying, "Thanks for the platform." Backstage, a producer muttered that he had flipped the script, and as John exited the building, his phone lit up with notifications as clips went viral and reactions poured in from across the spectrum. Emma texted, "You didn't just defend, you educated." And John replied, "Just shared the facts." The internet buzzed with forums dissecting every line of the email, users noting how his reading exposed the dangers of partial truths, influencers stitching videos urging people to always get the whole story, and even detractors conceding that while they might disagree, they respected the move. By afternoon, the full email thread was widely shared, sparking debates on media responsibility, while John returned to his office where staff replayed the segment, telling him he owned the room. To which he shrugged, saying, "The truth did." Calls came in from colleagues praising his grace under fire, and he took notes for future talks, turning the incident into a teaching tool. Headlines emerged calling him a transparency masterclass. Social media trended with memes of him flipping pages captioned, "When facts fight back." And a professor emailed that he was using it in a communications class as a perfect example. John framed a printout of the email as a reminder, reflecting that night and posting on X, "Context is king." Finish the sentence as likes poured in across divides. Joy mentioned it briefly in a later episode, noting that Kennedy had brought the heat with a folder, the moment lingering as a beacon for handling controversy. Read it all, stay calm, and let truth prevail. In a noisy world, John's quiet reading echoed loudest, proving one folder could shift perspectives. Weeks later, ripple effects continued, with more calls for full disclosures in media inspired by his stand. John carried on, folder ready for the next challenge, embodying the lesson that truth uncut wins. This wasn't just a TV win, but a blueprint for dialogue in divided times, reminding everyone that sometimes the best response is to simply read on. The end of the segment marked not a conclusion, but a beginning, sparking nationwide conversations about the ethics of information sharing. In interviews that followed, he expanded on the email's themes, always circling back to the core. We all have a role in protecting context. Schools incorporated the clip into curricula, teaching media literacy, showing how one cropped line can change everything. Teachers replaying John's reading on podcasts. Hosts analyzing his technique, no yelling, just facts, revolutionary. John himself hosted a webinar, reading similar historical examples where context flipped narratives, noting how Lincoln's letters were often misquoted, while participants shared personal stories of misunderstandings resolved by full disclosure. The email leak, once a potential scandal, became a case study in resilience as John's team fielded requests for the full thread, releasing it publicly with annotations. Here's the uncropped version. The site read, garnering millions of views, and critics who initially piled on backtracked upon review, acknowledging the intent was transparency, while supporters amplified it, with Kennedy exemplifying integrity. Even Joy, in a follow-up segment, reflected that the discussion had opened eyes, including hers, and the cultural impact grew, with finish the sentence becoming a catchphrase in debates, memes, and even merchandise, including t-shirts reading Kennedy's style, "Read it all." Late-night shows parodied the moment while highlighting its cleverness. But John, ever humble, downplayed the fame, saying it wasn't about him, but the principle. Though his approval rating subtly climbed not from partisanship, but from universal respect for his approach. In private, he confided to Emma, "That folder was my shield," to which she laughed, "More like a sword." Months later, the incident faded from headlines, but left a lasting imprint, a reminder that in an age of snippets, full stories endure, and John continued his work, always prepared to read the whole thing, inspiring others to do the same, and, in quiet moments, he would glance at the framed email, smiling at how one bold appearance had turned a whisper of controversy into a roar for truth. Following the electrifying segment on The View, where John methodically read through the full email and turned the tables with unyielding calm, the immediate aftermath unfolded like a digital wildfire, igniting reactions far beyond the studio walls. As he stepped off the set, shaking hands with crew members who offered quiet nods of admiration, his phone began vibrating incessantly with notifications signaling the storm online. In the green room, he glanced at texts from staff, social media alerts, and messages from unexpected contacts praising his poise. Emma called almost immediately, buzzing with excitement, saying the clip of him reading the email was already going viral with over 1 million views in the first hour alone. John checked X, where the hashtag Kennedy Full Story was trending nationally, accompanied by snippets captioned, "This is how you handle a setup with facts and grace," and "John Kennedy just gave a masterclass in transparency." Users from all walks of life chimed in. A teacher shared how she used the moment to teach context in class. A journalist admitted the full read changed their perspective. And everyday folks posted memes of John flipping pages with text reading. When truth drops the mic, the studio audience, still buzzing as they filed out, overheard comments like, "I came here skeptical, but he won me over. No drama, just straight talk." And one woman stopped a producer to say, "That was refreshing. More guests like him, please." Meanwhile, on Instagram and TikTok, creators stitched together montages of Joy's reactions against John's steady voice, amassing likes and shares that pushed the video into algorithm-fueled overdrive. A popular influencer with millions of followers commented, "Disagree with his views all you want, but respect the way he showed up and shut it down politely." Reddit threads exploded in subreddits like r/Arta Television and r/R Media, with users debating the ethics of cropped quotes, while Kennedy's reading exposed how easily words can be twisted, leaving the takeaway clear: lesson learned. The positive surge wasn't unanimous. Some detractors clung to the original snippet, posting counterarguments, but even those voices were drowned out by the growing chorus demanding full context in all discussions. Back at his office later that afternoon, John sifted through the influx of messages while his team compiled a report showing 5 million views across platforms, with shares spiking internationally. "This isn't just buzz," Emma noted. "It's shifting how people talk about information." John nodded, appreciative but focused, replying to a few messages from professors wanting to discuss media literacy. Amid the chaos, a nondescript envelope arrived via secure delivery. No sender listed, just a plain label addressed to him. Curious but cautious, he opened it carefully, revealing a stack of printed documents, internal memos from ABC's production team, timestamped and detailed. Scanning the first page, he saw a transcript of a pre-show meeting where producers discussed the leaked email. One highlighted line jumped out. "We know the quote's incomplete, but it packs a punch for the segment. If he pushes back, we can pivot to his tone." John's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in quiet resolve. This was proof the cropping wasn't accidental, but intentional, designed to spark controversy for ratings. Emma walked in as John finished reading, her face pale as he handed her the pages. "They knew and aired it anyway," he said. "Premeditated framing, but now we've got proof from inside. They verified the documents through a trusted analyst, likely from a whistleblower." "This changes everything," Emma said. John agreed, but chose diplomacy. Instead of outrage, they sent a formal letter to ABC requesting an on-air correction. "Let's keep it professional," he said. "Facts first. Invite a public conversation." The letter emphasized transparency, asking for a chance to share full context so viewers could judge for themselves. It went out that evening, and by morning, #ABC correction was trending. With news sites reporting Kennedy uncovers plot, calls for on-air fix. Influencers reacted, some praising his restraint, others acknowledging ABC aired the partial quote. TikTok clips revealing the envelope hit 10 million views. Public support snowballed with petitions. Emails to ABC and journalism students debating it in class. Kennedy's approval among independents rose not because of politics, but his approach. He accepted a few interviews stressing the bigger message. This isn't about one email, it's about full stories. ABC responded that they would air a follow-up. Ratings spiked, and John returned, folder in hand, calmly reading. They noted the quote was partial, but perfect for air. Host Joy moderated fairly, and John stayed focused, saying, "Let's fix this. Context helps everyone." Applause erupted as the segment clarified the email, admitted the cropping no malice. Just a lapse, and John closed with, "Thanks for the chance to set it straight." What followed wasn't fame, but change. Schools taught finished the sentence. Asterisk, even critics softened as John Kennedy continued showing up with the folder. A quiet reminder that truth shared fully unites. In the wake of the on-air correction and the widespread revelation of ABC's internal machinations, the saga surrounding his leaked email evolved into something far greater than a fleeting media storm, becoming a cultural touchstone, an enduring symbol of resilience in the face of distortion, and a catalyst for broader societal reflection on the power of unvarnished truth. As the initial frenzy of viral clips and trending hashtags subsided, the long-term repercussions manifested in subtle yet profound ways, reshaping not only John's public image but also norms of public discourse across various spheres. His office, once a quiet enclave of legislative focus, is transformed into a beacon for those seeking guidance on navigating misinformation, with invitations pouring in from think tanks, civic organizations, and educational institutions eager to tap into the wisdom he had demonstrated so effortlessly on national television. John approached these opportunities with characteristic humility, viewing them not as platforms for self-promotion, but as chances to amplify the principles that had guided him through the ordeal. Preparation, composure, and an unwavering commitment to context. Headlines from major outlets transitioned from dramatic recaps to analytical pieces dissecting the incident's implications. With Kennedy's folder flip described as a blueprint for battling fake narratives in the Wall Street Journal and hailed as from smear to seminar. How One Senator Schooled America on Transparency in the New York Times. These articles praised his methodical approach, noting how his refusal to engage in histrionics disarmed critics and won over skeptics, fostering rare bipartisan admiration. On social media, momentum built organically, and the phrase "finish the sentence" morphed into a movement, spawning user-generated content like motivational posters, educational videos, and apps designed to verify quotes by pulling full texts from sources. Influencers, educators, journalists, and everyday advocates shared personal anecdotes of applying the lesson, such as resolving workplace misunderstandings by insisting on complete emails or diffusing family arguments with full context rather than assumptions. John's social account saw a surge in followers, not from polarized echo chambers, but from a broad audience drawn to his steady demeanor. And he used the platform sparingly, posting occasional reminders like in any conversation, the whole story is the only story worth telling, which garnered hundreds of thousands of engagements. Respect for John grew palpably in professional circles, with colleagues in the Senate, regardless of party affiliation, approaching him with newfound deference during briefings and often referencing that view moment as an example of graceful crisis management. Neutral observers, including academics and media ethicists, lauded him in panels and podcasts. A prominent communications professor at Harvard remarked in a widely shared lecture, "Kennedy didn't just defend himself. He elevated the debate, showing that facts presented calmly can bridge divides where shouting only widens them." A claim translated into tangible shifts. Journalism schools revised curricula to include case studies on the incident, emphasizing the dangers of selective editing and the virtues of full disclosure. One such program at Columbia University developed a workshop titled The Kennedy Method, Context in Crisis, where students role-played similar scenarios, learning to prioritize evidence over emotion. Even in corporate settings, companies adopted full-story policies in internal communications, crediting the event as inspiration for reducing miscommunications and building trust among teams. On a personal level, John received an outpouring of correspondence underscoring the human impact. Letters from high school students inspired to question headlines before sharing. Notes from parents using it to teach their kids about fair play. In arguments and emails from professionals crediting his example with helping them navigate office politics. One particularly moving message came from a retiree in his home state of Louisiana. "Senator, I didn't always agree with you, but watching you read that email word for word showed me how to stand up without stooping low. It changed how I talk to my grandkids." John made it a point to respond to as many as possible, reinforcing the idea that these principles were universal, not exclusive to public figures. His silver pocket square, a subtle nod to his straightforward style, even became a minor meme, symbolizing quiet strength, with fans recreating it in photos shared online. Under public scrutiny, ABC quietly implemented reforms, echoing John's message, better training on context, full quote reviews for sensitive segments, and a public pledge to transparency without naming names. Joy Behar later quipped to Senator Kennedy, "Let's just say the full page hits harder than a punchline." Surprisingly, ratings for more thoughtful segments rose, proving accountability could also be good business. But the deeper impact lay in education. John's talk centered on a simple truth: in a world ruled by soundbites, seeking full context is not just smart, it's essential. He gave everyday examples, misjudging a friend over half a message or reacting to a headline without reading the story. Pause. Right. Ask questions, he urged. It builds empathy and stops fights before they start. Teachers picked it up, using the incident to teach critical thinking. And students practiced Kennedy-style replies, calm, factual, unshaken. Adult workshops followed, training people to verify before sharing, de-escalate with facts, and approach arguments with curiosity instead of combat. Research backed it. People trained in full context thinking reported better communication and deeper trust. John's story became a model of resilience, showing that preparation and poise can diffuse outrage. For youth raised in a reactive culture, it was a reminder that clarity beats noise. In the end, this wasn't just John's win, it was a win for thoughtful dialogue. As he said in one speech, we all face leaked emails in life. Seek the full truth, not to fight, but to